Barbarella exists for one reason. Nothing went the way it was supposed to. Not the script, not the sets, not even the director's idea of what movie he thought he was making. But behind all that shimmering innocence and space-age seduction, there was a film held together by nerves and guesswork. A shoot that pushed Fonda past her breaking point. Performances dubbed into voices that weren't their own. And a vanished bed scene no one has ever recovered. These are 13 weird facts about Barbarella, a film born from chaos that didn't just survive. It seduced its way into legend. Number 1. Barbarella didn't begin as a camp icon. She began as a shockwave. In 1962, Jean-Claude Forest introduced a cosmic drifter who floated through surreal worlds, shifting morals and unapologetic eroticism, a heroine meant to provoke, not comfort. His pages mixed adult sexuality with dreamlike sci-fi so boldly that U.S. Customs literally seized early copies at the border. Forest's universe didn't follow plots so much as moods. Planets built like hallucinations, villains shaped by psychology, and a heroine who wasn't saving anyone, just moving freely through a galaxy still terrified of liberated women. It was rebellious, erotic, and far stranger than anything Hollywood could touch. So when Paramount bought the rights, almost everything that made the comic revolutionary was removed. The identity horror Gorgon arc, gone. The erotic robotic subplot, gone. The bleak ship crash storyline, gone. Sexual politics, softened into playful 60s flirtation. The studio kept the look, the glitter, the vinyl, the psychedelic shapes, but stripped out the danger, the satire, and the surreal philosophy underneath. What survived on screen were only fragments, the optimism, the visuals, and the outline of a universe that was once much darker and weirder. Meanwhile, the comic kept evolving for decades, inspiring underground artists, European sci-fi, and modern reboots trying to reclaim the edge the movie left behind. Most fans never realize it. The film they think is outrageous is actually the tamed version. Hollywood kept the glitter, Forest kept the fire, and that fire needed a gambler bold enough to light the fuse. Number 2. Barbarella didn't reach the screen because Hollywood believed in it. It reached the screen because producer Dino De Laurentiis refused to let anyone tell him no. In the mid-60s, erotic sci-fi was a financial nightmare. Studios saw Barbarella as too adult, too weird, too expensive, and too impossible to market. Even with French financing and Paramount circling, De Laurentiis couldn't close the budget, so he pulled off one of the wildest producer maneuvers in film history. He made another movie just to raise the money for this one. That film was Danger Diabolic, a lean, stylish comic book heist movie that could be shot fast, cheap, and guaranteed to make money in Italy. Mario Bava worked miracles with miniatures, painted sets, optical tricks, and guerrilla-style lighting. De Laurentiis didn't need a masterpiece. He needed a hit, something to stabilize cash flow and give Paramount the financial guarantees they demanded before approving a psychedelic space epic. And the gamble worked. When Diabolic delivered, Barbarella finally got the green light. Sets expanded. Roger Vadim signed on. Jane Fonda was approached. Production rolled forward. Two cult classics were suddenly orbiting each other. One built to entertain, the other built to bankroll the dream. Most fans never realized this, but Barbarella's rocket didn't launch because a studio funded it. It launched because Diabolic stole enough money to build the ship. Before Barbarella soared into space, a thief in a black catsuit paid for the fuel. Now they just needed someone fearless enough to star in it. Number 3. Barbarella didn't begin with a script. It began with Terry Southern walking into a creative circus. Vadim wanted psychedelic eroticism. De Laurentiis wanted something cheap and accessible. Paramount wanted something audiences wouldn't panic over. And Southern, fresh off the chaos of Casino Royale, was trying to write a sexy, surreal sci-fi satire in the middle of a producer storm. The clashes started instantly. Southern joked that De Laurentiis didn't want a script so much as a blueprint for costumes and explosions. Vadim started rewriting him. Then more writers were brought in. Then more. Then more. 8 received credit, but insiders like Charlie B. Griffith swore the real number was closer to 14, each adding scenes, removing scenes, patching scenes, and contradicting the scenes written before them. It shows. One moment the film plays like erotic surrealism, the next like pop art innocence, and then suddenly as deadpan satire. That tone-shifting whiplash isn't style. It's the residue of a dozen different voices wrestling for control of the same movie. Griffith claimed he wrote a full quarter of the final script. Others insist even more uncredited writers drifted through the production. No one can agree on the actual count. Not the crew, not the producers, not the writers themselves. The records simply aren't clear. And here's the miracle. Somehow, the whole thing holds together. Amid the rewrites, the contradictions, the genre confusion, Barbarella ends up with a beginning, a middle, an ending, and a tone that unbelievably feels intentional. The dreamlike weirdness that fans love wasn't planned. It was the accidental product of a script that mutated every time someone new touched it. 8 writers signed the screenplay. 14 might have shaped it. And the chaos behind the camera became the surreal charm on screen. screen. Barbarella didn't have a script. It had a beautiful, psychedelic pileup that somehow became a cult classic. Number 4. Before Jane Fonda ever stepped into a silver spacesuit, Barbarella was offered to almost every major sex symbol of the 1960s, and every one of them walked away. Dino De Laurentiis wanted a superstar, someone whose name alone could sell an erotic sci-fi fantasy. His first choice was Sophia Loren. She refused. Verna Lisi turned it down next, afraid the role would wreck her dramatic career. Raquel Welch was approached at the height of her fame. She passed. Even Brigitte Bardot, the woman Roger Vadim himself had turned into an international icon, said no. The problem wasn't Barbarella, it was the genre. In the mid-60s, erotic sci-fi was career quicksand. One wrong move, and an actress could lose prestige overnight. No one wanted to be first. Then Roger Vadim entered the picture, and everything changed. He saw Barbarella not as pulp, but as a chance to build a new futuristic morality. A playful, surreal world where eroticism and imagination lived side by side. And he already knew the one actress who could pull it off, his wife, Jane Fonda. But even she said no at first. Fonda worried the film would look silly, that comic book sci-fi wasn't respectable, that camp sensuality could sink her Hollywood career. Vadim pushed back hard. Eventually, Fonda agreed, and the timing was perfect. She was already a lightning rod in America, thanks to daring roles and a now legendary Circle of Love billboard in New York that towered 8 stories above Broadway. The controversy made her a bold choice, and the only actress willing to take the leap. Every star before her said no. Jane Fonda said yes, and turned Barbarella from a risky comic adaptation into a pop culture icon. But her yes carried a weight she didn't fully understand yet, and the moment she arrived, the fantasy cracked. Number 5. Barbarella opens on one of the most iconic shots of the 60s, Jane Fonda floating in a carefree zero-gravity striptease. But nothing about that moment felt free to her. To fake the effect, Fonda lay on a sheet of plexiglass with a camera hovering just above her face, holding uncomfortable poses while the crew tweaked every angle, reflection, and scene. What looked effortless on screen came from hours of strain. Behind that performance, she was fighting a private battle. Fonda was struggling with bulimia and deep insecurity about her body, and Barbarella's skimpy costumes and constant close-ups only made it worse. The film treated her sexuality as spectacle. She felt exposed, anxious, and afraid of being judged with every take. Her marriage added another layer of tension. Director Roger Vadim, her husband, was entering a volatile period, often returning from lunch fogged by alcohol and giving slurred or erratic direction. Creative disagreements bled into personal arguments. Trust between them eroded right on the soundstage. Yet none of that reached the final film. Fonda still delivered a bright, playful performance, a heroine who smiles, teases, and drifts through danger, as if the world is weightless. The audience saw a fantasy. Fonda lived something far heavier, and then the danger turned real. Number 6. Barbarella looks like a glitter-drenched daydream, but shooting it at Cinecittà was closer to controlled disaster. Dino De Laurentiis rushed production so fast that the crew barely finished dismantling Danger Diabolic before Barbarella's sets were stacked on top of the leftovers. Caverns, corridors, villain lairs, all recycled, barely reinforced, and never properly tested. As soon as filming started, everything began to break. The worst accident came during the excessive machine sequence. Jane Fonda and Milo O'Shea thought they were rehearsing a simple torture gag. Vadim, wanting real fear, didn't tell them a hidden pyrotechnic charge was rigged under the set. When it detonated, panels cracked, flames shot upward, and both actors reacted in genuine panic. O'Shea later admitted he believed Fonda was being electrocuted. Vadim got his authentic moment by risking the safety of his cast. Then the bird chamber turned the studio into a nightmare. Dozens of birds were released to swarm Fonda and refused to behave. Vadim's solution was an industrial fan powerful enough to blast the animals directly at her. The birds panicked, defecated nonstop, and filled the humid set with feathers and filth. Roger Ebert happened to visit that day and reported that the entire space was covered in bird mess. Crew members slipped, equipment jammed, masks were passed around to keep people from gagging. Fonda didn't escape it. After weeks of breathing contaminated air and enduring repeated takes, she collapsed with a high fever and had to be hospitalized before shooting could continue. On screen, Barbarella is pure psychedelic fantasy. Behind the scenes, it was chaos held together with tape, luck, and an actress willing to push through conditions no one should have faced. Number 7. Barbarella was supposed to sound like French avant-garde sci-fi. Instead, it fell into total musical meltdown. Dino De Laurentiis hired experimental composer Michel Magnier, a legend of strange electronics and musique concrète, and he delivered exactly what he was famous for: dissonant tones, eerie mechanical pulses, and soundscapes that felt more like alien dreams than movie cues. It terrified the producers. They rejected the entire score in one sweep. Into the chaos stepped 2 Americans who didn't belong anywhere near a French-Italian comic adaptation, Charles Fox and Bob Cruz. crew. One would go on to write the Love Boat theme. The other had crafted pop hits like Big Girls Don't Cry and Can't Take My Eyes Off You. They rebuilt the soundtrack from scratch, swinging guitars, groovy rhythms, soft focus vocals, and a psychedelic pop vibe that turned Barbarella from art house surrealism into pure 1960s fantasy. The Glitter House layered in breathy vocals, giving the film the dreamy sound that fans now instantly recognize. But the final miracle came from a name no one expected: Maurice Binder, the man who created the James Bond gun barrel shot and 14 Bond title sequences. Binder designed Barbarella's opening credits like a cosmic Bond intro, with floating typography drifting across Jane Fonda's zero-gravity striptease. Sleek, sensual, hypnotic. It's the sequence that defines the entire movie, and it exists because Binder stepped in just as the production was losing control of its style. The music we know wasn't the plan. The titles we remember came from a different franchise altogether. Barbarella's identity wasn't found. It was rescued. Number 8. Barbarella sounds like a perfectly polished English-language film, but what you hear isn't what anyone said on set. With a cast pulled from half of Europe, accents clashed, tones shifted, and Roger Vadim wanted one smooth, dreamlike vocal world, so post-production became a dubbing factory. Anita Pallenberg delivered a fierce, magnetic performance as the Black Queen, and then Joan Greenwood replaced every word with that icy velvet purr. Even mime legend Marcel Marceau wasn't safe. His lines were re-recorded by Robert Rietti, the same voice artist who quietly shaped early James Bond films. It wasn't personal, it was the era. European co-productions built entire soundtracks in post, and Barbarella became one more psychedelic fantasy, held together by voices the actors never spoke. Number 9. Dildano, the frantic, wide-eyed rebel leader, was never meant to be intense, but that's exactly what happened when Italian actor Antonio Sabato first stepped into the role. Early production photos show him beside Jane Fonda, delivering the lines with dramatic weight, and absolutely none of the absurd energy the character needed. Producers realized the tone was collapsing, so they did something drastic. They replaced him. Enter David Hemmings. Playful, mischievous, and effortlessly funny. His version of Dildano snapped right into the film's campy rhythm, turning a near miscast into one of Barbarella's most memorable personalities. Sabato's scenes vanished into archives. Hemmings's Dildano became the one fans quote. Number 10. Sogo isn't just a decadent sci-fi kingdom. It's a psychedelic riff on Sodom and Gomorrah, rebuilt as a glitter-soaked warning about a civilization drowning in pleasure. Production designers shaped the city like a doomed paradise, beautiful on the surface and rotting underneath, a visual sermon wrapped in neon and smoke. But they hid jokes inside the darkness. The great tyrants Nises, Stomoxys, and Glossina aren't random names. They're parasitic flies, the stable fly and the tsetse fly. A quiet dig suggesting her entire court survives by feeding on everyone around them. And then there's the art. Right beside Barbarella's cockpit, tucked almost out of sight, sits a reproduction of Georges Seurat's A Sunday Afternoon on the island of La Grande Jatte, a slice of high culture floating inside a pop art fantasy. Sogo wasn't built to be silly. It was built to be seductive, corrupt, intelligent, and secretly biting. A city where biblical ruin, entomology humor, and fine art all whisper beneath the glitter. Number 11. For decades, fans have noticed something strange. Lobby cards and behind-the-scenes photos show Barbarella and the Black Queen on an ornate bed, a staged seduction moment that looks fully lit, fully costumed, and absolutely intentional. But the scene itself, it doesn't exist anymore. It's in no theatrical release, no TV cut, no VHS, no DVD, no Blu-ray, no raw footage has ever surfaced. Most historians believe the moment was cut for content, a quiet concession to censors already nervous about how far 1968 cinema could push erotic sci-fi. The film was daring, but not daring enough to keep that scene alive. All that remains now are still photographs, silent proof of a lost encounter between Barbarella and her rival, erased before audiences ever saw it. Number 12. Hollywood has spent half a century trying to bring Barbarella back, and every attempt has disintegrated on the launch pad. The collapse started immediately. After the 1968 film hit theaters, Dino De Laurentiis announced a sequel called Barbarella Goes Down, a deep-sea adventure meant to expand Forrest's universe. But when the movie underperformed in America, Paramount pulled out and the sequel died before pre-production even began. 2 decades later, De Laurentiis tried again with a cheaper, leaner sequel, even considering Jane Fonda's daughter Vanessa Vadim for the lead. But the early 90s had no appetite for erotic sci-fi, and the project evaporated the moment financing wavered. Then came the closest revival of all. Robert Rodriguez's 2005 reboot. Rose McGowan was cast. Bond writers delivered scripts. Concept art filled binders. Sets in Germany were already being prepped. And then the budget ballooned. Universal demanded Rodriguez recast the lead. He refused, and the entire production collapsed overnight. night. After that, Dino and Martha De Laurentiis mounted one last push, but rights negotiations stalled, studios backed away, and when Dino died in 2010, the final spark went out. Amazon tried next. In 2012, Nicholas Winding Refn signed on to direct a prestige TV series. A pilot script was ordered, early visuals were drafted, and then Refn walked away, saying, "You don't need to remake everything." Amazon shelved the project instantly. The most recent attempt came in 2022, when Sony announced a reboot starring Sydney Sweeney. No script, no director, no updates since. 7 revivals across 50 years, all undone by money, timing, or sheer bad luck. Barbarella isn't just a stalled franchise. She's a Hollywood ghost, forever returning, forever fading, and never quite making it back to the stars. Hey, wild how Barbarella keeps drifting back to Hollywood only to vanish again, right? If this cosmic cult classic still pulls you in, you can bring Barbarella home. Just check the links below for the Blu-ray, DVD, or 4K. Thanks for the support. It really means a lot. Now, let's slip right back into the stars. Number 13. Barbarella didn't arrive as a cult classic. In 1968, it was a punchline. Critics trashed it as sick and nasty. Moral watchdogs condemned its sexuality. Australia banned it for nearly 30 years. And in the US, the film stumbled at the box office, leaving Paramount embarrassed and ready to move on. But the movie did something no one expected. It refused to disappear. By the late 70s, Barbarella quietly resurfaced in midnight theaters, where crowds embraced the very things critics once mocked. Fashion designers fell in love with its fetish futurist costumes. Musicians borrowed its glam attitude. Comic artists rediscovered Jean-Claude Forest's surreal worlds and treated them like a visual toolkit for the next generation. Even the band Duran Duran lifted their name straight from the villain. Then came Paramount's 1977 re-release, retitled Queen of the Galaxy and packaged for the Star Wars era. It didn't turn Barbarella into a blockbuster, but it did reveal the truth. People weren't drawn to story or logic. They were drawn to style. What once seemed ridiculous became iconic. The camp charm, the psychedelic color palette, the erotic innocence, the handmade pop art energy. Over the decades, Barbarella evolved into a cornerstone of sci-fi aesthetics, influencing glam rock, synth pop, couture fashion, comic art, and films from Flash Gordon to The Fifth Element. It failed in 1968, but it won everything that came after. Barbarella didn't conquer her opening weekend. She conquered the culture. Bonus fact: when Dildano belts out his over-the-top resistance password, that long, impossible tongue-twisting chant, it isn't sci-fi gibberish. He's shouting the full name of a real Welsh village. And since there's no way I'm going to attempt saying it, I'll just put it on the screen so you can see it for yourself.
And our password will be Panfire Puthkin with Golgerich Pindrobel Lechlandithilio go go go.
The town actually exists, the name is legitimate, and Welsh speakers pronounce it daily without blinking. Barbarella simply stole it and turned it into the galaxy's most dramatic secret code. It's one of the movie's strangest surprises, a real piece of geography hiding inside a camp sci-fi rebellion disguised as a punchline. Because sometimes the wildest thing in Barbarella is the part that's true. Barbarella never belonged to 1968. She was too bright, too bold, too strange, a pop art fever dream that didn't care about rules or respectability. Critics tried to tame her, audiences tried to understand her, but time did what time always does with visionaries. It caught up, and suddenly, the camp, the colors, the erotic innocence, the fearless weirdness, all the things that once made her a misfit became the reasons she endured. Fashion borrowed her, music echoed her, sci-fi rebuilt itself with pieces she left behind. Because Barbarella was never meant to blend in, she was meant to blaze. So drop a comment and tell us which world you want us to drift into next. And don't forget to subscribe for more strange, beautiful stories from the films that changed everything. Because some cult classics don't just survive the years, they pull the whole galaxy into their orbit.